Sunday, the 9th of November 2025, and it's a beautiful day. It's mild. I'd say it's about, could be 13 or 14 degrees centigrade. And so I'm looking towards the setting sun. I'd be looking towards County Clare when I look over that way. So anyway, we had good response from some recent videos, and some of them were very heavy weather. But the reason I had to go into such detail about the wind farms was that there could be people watching who have knowledge of finances, and it might scare them. In other words, we might bring this to a head a lot quicker by doing it this way than if everyone plows on investing people's pensions, all kinds of funds into stuff that's never going to give a return. I noted that Greencoat Renewable Energy was on 67 cents this morning. 67 for a €100 share. So things are happening, and then there's a lot of them some of them are going bankrupt, and as I've made it clear, that all be bankrupt were not for some company like the ESB, National Toll Roads, SSE, loading it on your bill by the back door. Okay, they can never pay back their capital cost. You either believe that or you don't. At this stage, there's no point in continually repeating it. Now, one of the things as the COP30 summit progresses, and it's on all this coming week, I think, in Brazil, is to look at the overall context of these things. There is a thing called mass hysteria. There was a few outbreaks of it where people actually go mad. But if we look in my lifetime, one of the Ireland was seen, the nationalist people in Ireland saw that they were, or believed they were being oppressed by landlords, which they had to pay them rent, and you could be kicked out if you didn't. English landlords, essentially. And there was a struggle to get rid of them. But they didn't go for a clean slate. As soon as the government got freedom, it handed all over to the Catholic Church, and it built it into the Constitution. Sorry, a bit of dirt in my mouth. Built that into the Constitution, and it got to the stage where the Eucharistic Congress, after the Eucharistic Congress in the Phoenix Park in Dublin in 1932, there was an avalanche of clergy. Every young lad wanted to be a priest. Every family wanted one of the boys to be a priest. For one thing, it was said you wouldn't get to be a priest if there was any history of mental illness. So having one of your family a priest meant that somebody in authority decided your family was not inflicted with mental illness. But there was also the religious aspect of it, and the devout nature of it, and the commitment of men and women in convents and all that. But that got to a point about after the war, really, because when the war was on, nobody knew what was going on much, but after the war, it got to the stage where the clergymen were bringing away girls. If a girl got pregnant, they came out to the house and put her on a bike, a bar of a bike, brought her into the parochial house, got her moved off, had her brought into a home. She had to have her baby. She had to give it up for adoption. They sold the babies in many cases, and we all know the rest, Madeleine laundries and everything else. And there was an element in that of punishing the girls for getting pregnant, because the big thing the Catholic Church in Ireland didn't want was sexual promiscuity under any circumstances. But of course, it wasn't too long till some of themselves got into trouble with Bishop Eamon Casey and a few more, and the whole thing got liberalised very, very short time. And then Labour got into power with Fine Gael. It was Labour that brought around the progressive movement, and I agree with some of it. I mean, you couldn't go on in the modern age without divorce. You couldn't. I mean, you can't force people to stay in a marriage that's completely wrecked, in my opinion. That's my humble opinion. Other people will say it differently, and I have supporters who think differently. Anyway, that moved on, and it was a struggle. It wasn't, we didn't get a freedom from too much church interference, and I emphasize too much, without a struggle. It wasn't easy, and people condemned the likes of folks who stood up for the people. And Dr. Noel Brown was one example where he wanted to have tuberculosis vaccines and all this, and they didn't want it. that tried to stop him, and that's the very conservative and deeply conservative nature of Irish society. Anyway, that got a bit shook anyway, and there was the IRA troubles and the troubles in the north, and that left it hard for society to develop because government and politicians were too busy trying to save themselves. No TD knew if he'd be shot. There was British ambassador for Ireland was shot. Lord Mountbatten was blown up. There was awful stuff, and in the north there was terrible things happening. Now they'll say, "Oh, it wasn't all the IRA," whatever you say yourself. But the point about it is, as soon as that began to subside, the next thing you got was global cooling, and there was a film on the UTV television which said that Belfast was going to be under a half mile of ice, and it showed the process of everything freezing up. There was another film made of this, so we're going to freeze, and all the indications are that we are between two ice ages, and eventually we will freeze. That's the best information there is. No, you wouldn't think it today, and it'll certainly not be in our lifetime or the lifetime of anyone living now. So that was it. But there was no money in the freezing. What could you do about the freezing? How could you do it? Could you insulate houses to keep in the heat, make more comfortable? Could you install oil burners, or what could you do? There wasn't a whole lot of money to be made in it. Whereas even with the church, there was money to be made. They got legacies everywhere. Everywhere. People were leaving their money to the church. There's a farm beside me here, and 42,000 of it, plus another 20 savings, went to the White Fathers in Cork, who they guaranteed the owner heaven. That's only one case I know. And in America, they were getting vast amounts of money. So there was money in it as well as devoutness, and some of the nuns were devout Christians and all that. And but it got unpopular, and it began to be seen as a bit of drudgery, scrubbing floors for Christ and all this, which wasn't really, nobody could see the point of it. So the next thing was that the global cooling, which is still a threat, was it wasn't much money for anybody. And then they come up with global warming. In other words, that the CO2 in the atmosphere, which is rising, used to be about 280 parts per million. It's now 408 or 9. So it can be measured. But of course, all the plants absorb CO2. And so in tomato houses, you have to feed it into tomato houses to grow ripen your tomatoes, along with it settling. So that's the story. So if they just stopped emitting CO2, the plants would eventually be scarce. The amount of CO2 would drop, and there'd be a scarcity. But what's the exact correct level of CO2? And that is a matter of opinion. There's no doubt that many areas of the country are getting greener, and the trees around here are growing, and young trees are growing very fast. So that's an effect. So they'll eventually pull out the CO2 out of the air, and it reaches an equilibrium. Anyway, the point about it is that this came out, and then there was the carbon tax. The EU had a big carbon tax scheme, and it was going to, I think it was 700 billion, another billion was it, about 4 years ago. Carbon taxes and rules about carbon, and every way to make it a crime to use carbon. The problem was that the fuel that you were burning to make the carbon was essential for economic development. And so the climate change thing, which came in about right with Al Gore's program, The Inconvenient Truth, in 2006, it's now got to the stage where Friedrich Merz said that there's no more interest in climate change. He said that in the Rio summit. He went over with no money, and when they asked him for money, he said, there's no point in doing this. And I believe Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, his economy is on the rocks. He said the same. So this is precisely what I've been saying. You can surely shut down fuel completely, but you'll wreck your economy, and you'll give the march to the go ahead to China, India, and Russia, and they're not going to stop under any circumstances. So it's an impossible thing to do. Only for the EU is not a democracy. It would already not be done because people wouldn't vote for them. But people are voting less and less. So whatever the story with the climate, and I have no doubt it's going to be not as bad as they're saying. And Bill Gates said that. He admitted that too. He should have. He started a lot of this, but at least he's admitted now that that's not near as bad. It's nothing like what's being prophesied. And this is the traditional old harem scarum. Scare them over hell, scare them over cooling, scare them over warning, and it was ebbing, it was dying away when the COVID came out. And as I've said, I'd ask yourselves, look around you, post underneath the amount of people who are in hospital and at home who don't even know who they are. It's unbelievable. Who are totally unaware of who they are, who their friends are, who their children are. I'm just going to think now. I know one, I know two, I know a man my own age that's going that way. He's not in hospital yet, but he's going there. That's three. And I know of another one, which is four. And I don't be around the nursing homes in many ways. Four. And I was talking to a neighbour who visited somebody in a nursing home, and he said he saw a lady who had a family and she was lively and out and about. She has to be lifted in and out the bed, and she doesn't know who she is. So that's only in my own circle. So what I'd ask you to do is comment. Did you hear of this going on? Is this unusual? Is this unusual? Oh, I'm after thinking of another one, by the way. A lady who was a teacher. Lovely lady. And she's in the nursing home and doesn't know who she is at all. So what could have caused that? I would say the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, harem scarum. Now, there was a bad dose of the flu and it killed people. It was a severe dose. But to give people an untested vaccine was criminal in my view. And I tried to stop it, but I was shut off the media. So there is another scare. And in every one of those, somebody had money to make. The only one that didn't have money to make was global cooling. It wasn't so easy doing it. But with the global warming, you had the windmills, you had the solar farms, you had the whole lot. Glenville Tower in London put up a big heap of insulation. It went on fire and burned 53 people, all to save the planet. So that's kind of waning now. It's not completely gone, but it's waning. And it wrecked the economies of Britain. The steelworks are on life support in Britain, and they have loads of coal. Wrecked the economy of Germany, wrecked the economy of France, and to a lesser extent Italy a bit. But it didn't wreck the economy of Russia, or it didn't wreck the economy of China or India. They're burning away, and that's my point. Whether you like it or not, they're going to burn it away, whatever you do. Now, with the invasion of Ukraine, the fact of the matter is, it was the Allies, the American and NATO, that tried to take over Georgia and were beaten out. They tried to take over Burkina Faso and were beaten out. And they tried to take over, which they did take over the Baltic states, but those people there were happy enough with that. But they tried to take over Ukraine. And when it's no doubt about it, and Glenn Deason makes this point. He's a highly qualified Scandinavian person, expert, and he makes the point that after Putin invaded the Ukraine, now don't forget, they overthrew the democratically elected government in 2014. These people, Victoria Nuland and all these, and put in dictators. It was the West did that. But after Putin invaded, Zelensky began to see he wasn't joking, and he was about to meet the Russians on the Belarus border. This is what Mr. Glenn Deason has said, and he has a book written on it, and we'll have a look at it again. He was about to meet the Russians on the border and secretly settle this before it got out of hand. And the Russians were kind of all right. They had their principles, but Mr. Zelensky was visited by Victoria Nuland, the American Secretary of State, and Boris Johnson for the British government, and told under no circumstances. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that if he had to plough on and make an agreement with the Russians, they'd have come and killed him. They'd have killed him. So he was caught in this insidious position, and it puts him in a slightly better light that he knew that and had the wit to do that, but they weren't going to have it under any circumstances. So that's what Mr. Dresden, that is correct. Sure, I remember Johnson coming over and getting off the plane and meeting Zelensky to order him not to settle. Anyway, we now have the situation where their weakness has been exposed. Russia can do what they like. Russia can laugh. They're taking over a lot of it. There's unbelievable loss of life. And the Americans and NATO will fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian soldier. And Lindsey Graham said that. We are able to have this war with no deaths. It's all Ukrainians. So that's the thing. So now that that's spun out and the Russians are going to give them nothing, it looks like that Russia is prepared to allow some of the frozen assets that are held in Belgium, and I'd say only half of them are available. According to some of experts, a man called Michael Hudson, an economist, a very well historian, etc., he says that the money even that's held in the 120 billion held in Belgium is scattered all over the place. It's not there in one lump. So it could be very hard to get it. Anyway, they want to give it to Ukraine to fight the war. The Russians are kind of coming around to the fact that, well, if it was used in their occupied areas, the areas where they are, now, they'll not agree to that, of course. The West won't agree to that. And in case anyone disagrees with me, I have a witness that saw them killing people in Odessa. They saw the Ukrainians attacking Russians and burning them alive, and the previous government of Zelensky refused to allow the police to intervene to save them. And this is the very same in South Africa with the white farmers. The government doesn't go out and kill the white farmers. It's the locals does that, looking for land, etc. But the government refuses to do anything about it. That's how it works. That's the way this works. So anyway, that's the story. So then the next thing is that this whole Ukraine thing now will be used to oil up the war machine. Rheinmetall is a weapons of war, tanks and all that, and they're getting it fired up, ready for production and putting it into production. The problem is none of the Europeans or NATO have any money, so they're going to beg, steal or borrow. So it looks to me like that there'll be lean pickings. Here in Ireland, they joined the EU because what they were going to get out of it, and now it looks the opposite, that they want us to contribute, and we'll see how well that goes. Viktor Orban says he's not going to follow with Russia. The Slovak president says the same, and there has been talks between Orban of Hungary and Meloni of Italy, President Meloni of Italy, and the EU is not all getting its own way, but they're very, very adamant that Ursula von der Leyen and them are going to run the show and keep this war going for another 15 years anyway. Now, that seems a lot. Well, if you want me to cut it back to 9 or 8, I will. But what would happen in the morning if President Trump went over and met Putin and came to an agreement and brought in Zelensky and told Zelensky, forget about those Europeans, don't talk to them at all. Here's the deal. You have to do this, that, and the other. We'll give you a bit of help. We'll guarantee whatever area you have, and the Russians will guarantee theirs, and the Russians would have to get Crimea, that's part of Russia legally, and they'd have to get the Donbass and the Levant, but they might leave them Odessa, and Trump might blow about how he saves Odessa, the wartime port, and get on to build it up. Well, the first thing is the EU would object to that. The EU will not object, will not allow a settlement in Ukraine under any circumstances. It's defeat Russia or nothing, and they can't defeat Russia. Not physically. They have nothing. They're straw men and women. So what's going to happen? If the Ukraine war stops, how is Europe going to manage? It has no boogeyman now to slay. It has nothing. You could see American money, you could see money and things going into the part that Putin has, and Putin might say, you go on, I'm not going here, you build up your own society there. Go ahead, we'll put a big fence up the middle of it, and you do the best you can. Where are they going to get the money? And why are we involved in the Ukraine at all? It's not a member of NATO, it's not a member of the EU. It's because they want to grab it. They want to unseat Russia. And the war machine really thought they could put Russia out, put a puppet president in, and take over all the great wealth that's in Russia. Doesn't look to be going too well to me. So as the weariness of the Ukraine war dries away, and as Friedrich Merz and Keir Starmer says, the weariness of the global warming, it's take it or leave it, nobody gives a damn anymore, they've just heard enough of it, and the broadcasting companies that are preaching this are going wallop like RTE and all of them, and it's just getting wearisome. They say, and they know that, and so what's the next thing? They have to come up with another scare. They have to come up with another scare. They'll think of something. I think it will be to say that there's a massive bad threat to people's health and they have an injection to fix it. I'd say it'll be something different to COVID. They'll say there's something there. We got to vaccinate the kids. We got to vaccinate everybody. And the big pharma will make money, and Bill Gates and a lot of them will have shares in there. I'd say that could be it. What else could it be? What else could it be? I don't think they're only going to be able to drive the cars off the road. Looking at Ireland this morning and out and about all week, the amount of cars is unbelievable. But if there has been an increase in electric cars and hybrid cars, as the government hoped, let's say that the amount of electric cars on the road is 10 times what it was 2 years ago. The amount of total cars is still way up. So the amount, you know what I mean? The amount of electric cars was, we'll say, 5%. Now, maybe 4,000, we'll say. Well, now it's 40,000. But there's 10 times the amount of ordinary cars as well. So you can never say the amount. You can say there's more electric cars, but you can't say the percentage of them went up. They're definitely not all electric where I am, but they are selling them a bit for now anyway. So this is the story. So this is the climate, this is the green, connecting CO2 as a pollutant, which it is not, and saying it is. And where are they going to go next? When we see the BBC telling lies about what Donald Trump said and getting caught out, their credibility is sinking fast. Meanwhile, in Britain, the economic situation is dire. I'd almost be sure they'll bring in the inheritance tax on farmland, and that'll destroy Britain. They're absolutely caught for money. They have no mandate. It was seen in an opinion poll that the Labour Party would lose all its seats if there was an election. But that doesn't mean they're not going to stay there. The MPs that are there realise they're never getting re-elected no matter what to do. So they'll hang on to the bitter end, and there's going to be some fun. There's going to be some fun. Meanwhile, their big thing, migration, they've never explained why they want all this migration. There's a pushback against that, all right. And there is a big push. There are really reversing their policies. And I think I'm the cause of that myself. I'm one of the few that changed the policy. It's just so ridiculous and so unsustainable that they have to try and do something. We'll soon see how that goes. So hear 'em, scare 'em, as the fellow said. Always have a scare. My own view is I don't get scared. To hell with it. I don't get scared. I don't. If a cow here breaks out on the road and is out wandering the road, I have a panic, all right, to get her back in case somebody be injured or I'd be caught with the cow getting hit or killed. That's the only thing that frightens me. Or somebody sick or somebody in a bad way or hearing of an accident and somebody killed or something. I hate that. But other than that, why should I let somebody in Russia or in Europe, a German or an American or anyone else or Joe Biden scare me, or Mary Robinson, or Greta Thunberg, a dropout from school? Why should I be bothered letting that one have any say in how I think? I think I'm not going to enjoy the wee bit of nice evening here and have a bit of fun, do something or other, and make something or do something, and even take it easy, have a nice lunch or something, just because they are at this. And you see, the other thing about Bill Gates, he's trying to destroy beef and dairy products. He wants them gone. Why? Because he has shares in all these places making the fake beef, fake meat, and the fake dairy products. That's what he's at. So these people are absolutely no morals at all. They have no little connection with ordinary humanity. And unfortunately, we still have some people who are prepared to vote for them in the polling booth and will vote for them. The 5 TDs we have in Cavan Monaghan, we never hear anything out of them at all. Nothing about these issues. Never. Matt Carthy, a slight little bit, I have to say. He does at least talk about it. But that's it. We might as well just put in 5 statues, and that's going to be the way in the next election. Meanwhile, Micheál Martin, he has a coup against him, and he's away, ran off to the COP summit, and he has to come back. And according to the papers today, they're going to try and push him out, but he's not going to be pushed out, and he will not be pushed out. And it's a good thing. The longer he stays, the better, because it'll mean they'll get less and less. We also have to watch, and I take a certain amount of pleasure in this. We give them a good kicking in the election. We had a big spoiled vote of 13%. That's unprecedented in any Western democracy. A calculated message from 13% of the voters. It has to annoy them. So they're getting it everywhere. Now, for those people there in the paper who have been burning and doing damage to stop this migration, I would say to you, stay within the law, protest and everything, but don't go out doing malicious damage, because if somebody gets burnt alive or something, it only tarnishes us all. We have a good cause to fight without having violence. That's the only point I can make. All right, comment underneath, folks. They'll want to scare us. I'm not going to be scared by anybody, whether it's church, state, or anyone else. No way. And I'm not going to be scared into fighting Russia, and I'm going to try my best to make sure no one I know ever volunteers to fight for any European government. The Irish government, the Taoiseach, the Deputy Prime Minister Harris, has said we will take out part of the triple lock. We don't need a constitutional referendum for that, and that means that they're aiming to get stuck in with the EU and join the war effort. We'll make it very, very difficult for them to do that. They're totally out of touch with reality in all of Europe and in Britain. But the voter is still putting in these idiots. He's like Ed Miliband. And the whole steelworks all shut down, and him wanting war. And he shut down the steelworks with his net zero. This is the situation, and this is what some of our neighbours and people are voting for, and they are voting for it. So my job is to keep you informed so you know what's going on. We'll see you now back, folks, soon. Comment underneath. They always want to scare us, and I'm yawning. Oh, I'm not interested in being scared. I just couldn't care less. There is a scare about the economies collapsing. That is something I would be a wee bit afraid. I don't know how that'll impact. To say that they won't be able to pay any pensions in Germany. Now, don't forget, Germany's driving a lot of this, and Germans are mad. I've told you that before. In fact, I met a lady at the bottle bank the other day, and she was German. I said, "Do you know your people are stone mad?" I thought she'd fight with me. I know, they're stone mad, she says. And that Hitler was mad. He was mad. And they are mad. And now they're getting into power after the whole effort of the West to keep them down and keep them in the EU. Now they're running the EU. I lost one distant relative in the Great War of First World War, and I ain't losing any more. Not whatever they do. Not whatever they try to do. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. We'll see you back soon.